Now, time to take you through the morning papers. Here with me to review them today are journalist and broadcaster Bidisha Mamata and the Chief Executive of International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart-Allen, in the studio, which is very nice to see you. And still lovely to have you, Bidisha, even though we've not got you here with us, sometime soon, I'm sure. And in fact, we're starting with you, Bidisha. You want to kick off with the front page of The Times this morning, which focuses on the nurses' strike, which is due to start tomorrow evening. I think it's 28 hours, this strike now.
Yes, it's 28 hours after a proposed second day after a court hearing was ruled unlawful, even though even in the court hearing itself, some of the comments indicated that there's broadly a lot of public support for the nurses who are walking out. It's 8 p.m. tomorrow until midnight on Monday. But Great Ormond Street has issued a note saying that because there are no exemptions on this walkout, so there's no exemptions for cancer care or intensive care or the emergency room or anything else, they are calling it a sort of serious business incident. They cannot totally guarantee that there is going to be coverage across all those essential services. However, it's interesting to note that everyone on either side has said that they do broadly support this lawful protest in walking out. And they also note that even though it's been fractious, discussions have been continuing. So it wasn't a very equivocal split against rejecting the last pay offer, which was around 5% plus a £1,600 topping up of last year's salary. They're getting there.
Well, yes, and interesting as well, Bidisha, that we do learn this morning that the RCN, as we understand it, is working to potentially make some mitigations as far as staffing is concerned. So it's interesting to see whether that will be addressed. And quickly as well, the health unions are split, aren't they, on whether or not to accept the government's offer. So that could have an impact in the days and weeks ahead.
Yes, if you look again at the way people are voting, it's not that 90% of members and activists are roundly rejecting the government just because it's the government. It's clear that both sides are working extremely hard to come to some kind of agreement on this. And of course, regarding this court case that struck out the second day of the strike, no one ever wants something to get to court like that.
Well, no, that's right. And Alison, very quickly with you as well. I mean, that court case won't have helped that feeling of trust between the unions and the government.
Absolutely.
And hospitals, will it?
Absolutely.
And all the time, public opinion is a factor.
Of course it is. And that's one of the things the RCN is all too aware of, is how the public perceives the role of nurses. And especially on the back of COVID, you had these incredible people giving up 80, 90, doing 90-hour weeks to save people's lives, including Boris Johnson, and absolutely putting themselves in harm's way in the course of doing their work. So I think public opinion generally is on the side of the nurses, it does seem to me, for those reasons. So yes, I think they have credibility and credit in the bank, so to speak, in terms of trust.
Yeah, and so let's see how this plays out. Because it's going to be a really interesting week actually for them. With voting going ahead on whether or not health unions as a whole will accept the government's offer.
Yep.
So that's to come. Let's turn to the Daily Mail, though, Alison, because you were interested in their front page story. And this is about various bodies coming together to fight what they call a tourist tax.
Yes.
So what exactly is this tax?
Yes, so basically, tax-free shopping was killed off, if you like, a couple of years ago. So international...
This is for tourists,
Yeah. So any international passport holder could go into any shop, show their passport, and not pay the 20% VAT. And that is a very attractive proposition that brings tourism to this country. And if you are competing with other countries around the world, especially EU countries where you can show up and get your tax back there, this country then decided not to do that, which means that the tourists smartly say, well, why would I bother going to the UK? I'll go to France, I'll go to Germany, Italy, etc., other places to buy usually luxury goods, because 20% on luxury goods is quite a lot. So the head of Burberry, the head of M&S, the head of leading retailers have come together and said, listen, go back and please reinstate the tax-free shopping for the UK, because the knock-on impact is that these tourists also spend on hotel rooms, spend on restaurants, spend on other things. So the economy overall gets a boost from these this sort of spending.
Quick thoughts on the Daily Mail making it a campaign of theirs, or is it a campaign? Yeah, Daily Mail campaign.
Yes, it is.
Do you think that will get much public support, given that people are struggling with the cost of living crisis? They may think, well, tourists being able to buy luxury goods more cheaply.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's probably not on everybody's radar screen as important, frankly, but in terms of the British economy, for those that watch the economy, like myself and other business people, we're interested in this because we want the UK to be much more successful globally in competing with other parts of the world. And at the moment, this is a handicap.
Okay, let's move on, Vidisha, shall we, to the front page of The Mirror. And their headline is "A New King for Our Times." So they're reflecting a poll, aren't they?
Yes, they are, but it really makes me think of what Alison's just been saying, because we've been talking about luxury shopping, and now you've got Prince Charles, now King Charles, saying that he owns his privilege and all his luxury and wealth. And in fact, the kind of king he's going to be is one that is in charge of a much more slimmed down, much more humble monarchy. And 80% of people are with him. They are looking at the monarchy and thinking, hang on, we don't want the soap opera elements. We don't want the scandals. And we're also in an age with the cost of living crisis and so much inequality and stalled social mobility that many people, not just frothing anti-monarchists, are looking at the royal family and going, why do you guys have so much stuff? Why do you have literal, actual palaces and gorgeous paintings when we're all struggling and getting a horrible shock every time we go to the supermarket? So King Charles is at least signalling, despite his extraordinary wealth, that he is going to be cognizant, at least, of the humongous responsibility that you have if you have that much wealth and power, and that he's in charge of not just the royal family, but the image of the royal family. And that the younger royals will be expected to have something to say, have something of substance, be useful in the world, not just be there symbolically to go to lovely pageants and dress ups. They need to stand for something.
Okay, yes, and the Mirror survey says 80% back him in his plans to trim down the monarchy. Let's move to the FT, shall we, Alison, because their front page story, I think The Guardian leads on it as well. This was the decision by the chairman of the BBC to step down yesterday.
Yes, well, this controversy has been swirling around the BBC now for several months, and Richard Sharp's been under a lot of pressure on the back of the perception of how he was appointed. And so he's decided either he's been pushed or he's opted to leave to try to bring some more stability back to the BBC, because it's been all-consuming for the BBC, and it also doesn't look very transparent, or his appointment being completely on a merit basis. So now there's a scramble to look at other candidates to succeed him as chair, and people like Gary Lineker and others are calling for an approach that is not about politics, not about being a donor to the party of the day, but being qualified. And, you know, all of these things we're talking about this morning, it's really interesting. All of these stories really are about transparency and in a way, equity, and whether people are in the roles they're in for the right reasons. Do they have the right qualifications? You know, do they know how to lead a variety of stakeholders inside and outside a very complicated organization? So it's going to be very interesting to see who is put forward for this role.
That's right, and interesting to see how they go about it as well. We don't have very much time, but in a kind of almost related issue, I guess, front page of The Express, BBC must act to silence Lineker, they've said. Vidisha.
Yes, and in fact, this carries on perfectly from what Alison explained so clearly. So Gary Lineker, the national treasure and Match of the Day presenter, very highly paid, has taken to Twitter and simply stated that the government of the day should not be selecting the chairman of the BBC, especially since Richard Sharp has had to go because he failed to declare a couple of clashes of interest. One was that he set up a meeting between Boris Johnson and someone who gave Boris Johnson an £800,000 loan for something or other. Not only that, but then he told his Tory party friends that he himself wanted the chairman's job. And then at the selection panel, the selection panel were informed that Richard Sharp was pretty much the only candidate who was approved by government. So there's all sorts of issues.
Sorry, Vidisha. We're out of time, but the Express saying that Lineker should be silenced, I guess. Anyway, we're out of time, but I'll see you again in the next hour. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.